Continuing a really important conversation with one of the most influential members of the House of Representatives, a member of its Intelligence Committee. His name is Representative Chris Stewart of Utah. And Congressman, you were talking a bit about the kinds of weapon systems, in addition to the Javelin, these Stingers that have been effective against at least low flying aircraft. Is that another of these systems that you think is warranted? And what else should be in the mix in the hardware side of the military kind? And when you talk about escalation, is there a concern that what we're doing on the economic side is really full on war with the Russians that might be seen by Putin as pretty escalatory in itself?
Oh my gosh, Frank, there's a lot to unpackage in your question, and I hope we have an hour, but I don't think we do. So let me try,
Take 2 minutes.
try to be very brief. Number one is the economic escalation is something that we have to be sensitive to because you may reach a point where almost a point of no return on that. It's already going to take years for the Russians to if they were to perhaps let's say that they withdrew from Ukraine tomorrow. Still, the implications of this will be them with them for years. And I think the economic sanctions are one of the most valuable tools we have. But again, we need to be thoughtful in how we implement those. The second thing you mentioned is, again, the military hardware. You're exactly right. I think that the Javelin, the Stingers, obviously just a continual supply of ammunition. My concern isn't so much that we're giving them the right things, because I think that we have, but we need to make it sustainable. We need to make sure that they don't run out of these weapons and these systems we've given them. And then last thought I want to mention on this, and I'll do it briefly, but I think it's important, and that is we should have been doing this 4 months ago. I mean, Frank, you remember the President of the United States went to the American people, he went to Vladimir Zelensky, he went to NATO, and he said definitively that Putin is going to invade Ukraine. If he believed that, and he did, he should have been taking the opportunity then to arm them, to help prepare
Yes.
them. It's so much harder now that we have to slip it across the border. That those armor, that material is subject to attack from Russia, as we've seen in the last few days. Oh my gosh, I wish we'd done it 4 months ago, three
No
months ago,
question.
instead of trying to do it now.
And it's a perfect segue to the next topic that I wanted to turn to with you, Congressman, and that is the lesson here is, as you say, it would have been far preferable to deter this aggression in the first place. My personal assessment is Biden was hoping that Zelensky would surrender. And that's why he was talking up the threat so much. Not that he was trying to warn them, but to persuade them to give up. But we're now looking at the possibility, and I'd like your thoughts on this, sir, as to whether or not China is taking away from all of this the idea that forget about it, the attack on Taiwan, let's say, is simply going to be too costly, too difficult. We'll run into economic sanctions and so on our side. We don't want that. Or whether, in fact, perhaps for internal reasons, Xi Jinping, Xi, Xi Jinping, the Chinese dictator, Putin's counterpart, is going to be saying, well, I need to rally around the flag, my folks. I'm going to go for it and see what I can do to take advantage of the distractedness of the West and, frankly, Joe Biden's infirmities to
Yeah,
see what I can do to get away with a long-standing objective of my country and thereby guarantee my third term. Again,
yeah,
a lot to unpack there too, sir. But what are your
yeah.
thoughts as to the lessons that should be learned, and where do you think China goes?
Yeah, again, and that is really the question, isn't it? Because look, Vladimir Putin, short of him launching 2,000 nuclear missiles, is not going to destroy the United States. I think in 10 years we're not going to be worried about Vladimir Putin. We're going to be worried about the existential threat of our future, which is China. And so we do have to ask those series of questions that you did. And honestly, they're unknowable. Some of them, at least, are unknowable. We can't get into the mind of President Xi. But we do know this, as you said, he's up for re-election. He has to have the support of the elites around him, and that is never assured when you're a dictator. They could lose that support at any time. The other thing I would say is this idea of reuniting Taiwan. it isn't just a feel good thing to them. They consider it an essential part of their future. And as you said again, Frank, look, they went into Hong Kong. They took Hong Kong because we were so diverted with the coronavirus. They did that without anyone noticing at all. I mean, there wasn't so much as a hiccup from the West when they took Hong Kong. And so I think they thought, well, we can do Taiwan at the same time while they're diverted with the Ukraine. I actually think, though, and this is my personal view, that the opposite argument is actually in play right now. And that is China is looking at this united front from the West. They're looking at these severe sanctions. And I don't think it dissuades them from taking Taiwan at some point, but it certainly has given them pause. And it probably has said to them, we need to prepare economically in ways we probably didn't anticipate we would have to. And that may take them a little bit of time. Does it stop them from going into Taiwan? I don't think it will. Does it make them think, yeah, this is going to be harder and more complicated, again, especially from the economic side, than we maybe anticipated? Because I think they were thinking, hey, this is going to be like Hong Kong. No one's going to say anything. I don't think they feel that way any longer, and they realize that it's going to take some preparation to anticipate the economic sanctions and how they would deal with them.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. In the meantime, and let me just say, Congressman, one of the things that I've admired so much about your service to our country is not only what you've done in uniform, but also your work on the House Intelligence Committee and on the House China Task Force that was stood up, unfortunately, without Democratic support, which I would have hoped for, but and I know you all worked to try to achieve. But you laid out a pretty impressive array of recommendations as to what we should be doing now about China.
Yeah.
And I think, enhancing deterrence on Taiwan is one part of that. Obviously, enhancing our ability to use various economic instruments to counter the Chinese predations was another. A very important part of this, though, and I just would be fascinated with your assessment of how you and your colleagues look at this, is we have an awful lot of Americans in the business elite, in particular, the financial sector, most especially, who really see no problem um, migrating, well, not just technology and know-how uh, and various industrial capabilities to China and supply chains, but also billions and billions and billions of our money, pension funds and investment funds and the like. What needs to be done about that kind of support for this mortal enemy of ours, whether they come after Taiwan immediately or not?
Yeah, I mean, the work we did on a China task force is some of the most important work. It's one of the things that I'm most proud of my time here in Congress. And you're right, we did try to get many of our Democratic colleagues. Nancy Pelosi would not allow them to. What a mistake! But the truth is that many of them support the ideas, the recommendations from the task force, and they should. Many of them are bipartisan.
Right.
But and this will sound perhaps overly dramatic, and I hope it doesn't. I'm convinced it's true, and that is Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan, among others, have said no foreign nation will ever destroy this country. The only way we fall is if we commit national suicide, and there's no better example of that. There is no better example of that than what you just indicated there. Our willingness to give technology, to give military power, to give capabilities in financial markets and financial instruments to willingly to the Chinese, as if there are no repercussions from that. And one of the really deep studies we did, and some of the most important recommendations, deal in financial services. It deals with what you've talked about there. For heaven's sakes, why in the world would we endow China with this type of power over our own markets, over our own economy, over our own ability to do financial services and banking around the world? And we've done it because people simply love money more than they love their own country. And shame on people, these very powerful people here in America who recognize what they're doing, but they just continue to do it because they're making so much money at it.
Yeah. Chris, it's bad enough that you're right. We've ceded a lot of control and influence over the financial sector to the Chinese Communist Party, and that translates, as you know better than anybody. Thank you, Chris Stewart, for joining us. Come back to us again soon, if you would.